Hi everybody, David Fogel back with you, CEO of the Symphonina Foundation, back with another Symphonina Foundation podcast, and I'm joined today by composer, and that doesn't even begin to describe David Doss. David, it's great to be on the podcast with you. I want to congratulate you for, there's so many things that I could congratulate you for, but you're producer on the Grammy-nominated Aaron Lazar's Impossible Dream. I would like to talk with you about that, and you've worked on hundreds of different movies and TV programs, and you've been involved in the organization for the Society of Composers and Lyricists, and also I think Academy of Scoring Arts too. So, but I'd like to know, first of all, what have you been up to?
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It goes without saying, I'm a huge fan of the Symphonina Foundation and what you're doing. And really, because you're specifically spurring people, myself included, to write new music. And, this is the age of AI, and we're all kind of wondering what that means for us artists. But the answer has to go back to human beings have been expressing themselves creatively for thousands of years. That shouldn't stop just because computers have learned a few of our tricks.
That's true.
So I'm so glad you continue to do what you're doing. It's been an honor to have been a part of it, and I'm looking forward to
Well, let me digress for a second before we return to what I think this is important for people to know. So when I first started the Symphonina Foundation and we got the idea for having a composer contest, I needed to have some people who would help with judging. And one of the people who impressed me was David. And I got impressed by David, and many people did. I just looked up your video. This is what you doing the mock-up for the opening to Star Wars. It's a very famous video now. You have 176,000 views the last I saw from 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think probably about 8 years ago is when I first saw it. And I said, that is a guy who I would love to have be a judge. And I asked you, and you said yes. And I mean, you didn't have to say yes. We were just starting. We were, nobody knew what we were doing. And you wrote very insightful comments for the composers on their entries, which I greatly appreciated. And I encouraged all of our judges to do that. Not all of them do, but it's greatly appreciated. So I greatly appreciate all the help that you've given over the years and support and encouragement. It's just been wonderful.
Absolutely. As already said, I think it's the work that you're doing is vital. And I love talking about the craft of what we do and being in community with other people. I learn things from every piece of music I listen to, whether the person is more experienced or less experienced or differently experienced than me. Like, I'm always listening and taking things in. So I think it's a valuable part. It's why I do score studies from time to time. In fact, I've got one planned for this week on John Adams, which I'm really excited about doing. I love talking and thinking about the craft of what we do. I love sharing with other people, and of course, I love doing it too. So, between all those things, it's a privilege to make a life in music.
Yeah, let's talk about Impossible Dream for a second. How did you come to be involved in the project, and what was all? I'm sure it was all wonderful, but let's hear how it went.
Yeah. So Impossible Dream was a bit of a unexpected magical surprise for all of us. It dates back to Aaron Lazar, the artist of Impossible Dream. Aaron is a childhood friend of mine. We went to junior high and high school together. We made music together in groups while we were growing up. We lived just like less than a mile from each other. We both come from a very highly creative gene pool, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Through the years after high school, we've kind of gone in and out of each other's orbit. We've always wanted to work together. We've done some little things here and there. Aaron found a very successful career on Broadway as a singer, as a performer, as an actor. And unfortunately, a couple of years ago, he started exhibiting the early symptoms of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And as you can imagine, that would rock anybody to the core when you're diagnosed with that. So as Aaron was processing the reality of living with that disease and how he was going to form his response to it, that was the genesis of the Impossible Dream. He said, I don't want to just I don't want to let this disease take me. I want to fight back. This is my impossible dream to beat it. Mm-hmm. So he started calling everybody he knew in the industry, everybody he'd ever worked with, especially on stage, in the Broadway musical theater world and said, let's do this. And the actual song, Impossible Dream from Man of La Mancha, ended up kind of being the guiding principle of that album. And it is the kind of project that just snowballed over time. He called me one day and he's like, hey, we're hanging out in the studio. You want to come and like help a little bit or do a vocal arrangement or two? I was like, yeah, sure, of course. And then that snowballed. And then, but the more and more names got attached to it. And he had some very high profile names from the musical theater world. Lin-Manuel Miranda, Kristen Chenoweth, tons of people who it's a little bit like We Are the World. Once one person says they're in on it, the next person's like, oh, what are you doing? Can I be in on it too?
Yeah, yeah.
So the project just continued to snowball. I would say it kind of apexed in one of the most memorable studio days of my life when we were with Josh Groban and we were singing Sting's song, Let Your Soul Be Your Pilot. And we had messed around with different arrangement possibilities. And then suddenly we found ourselves around the piano, me, Josh, and Aaron, and we just started making up an arrangement on the spot, and it just blossomed. So the entire project was a little bit like that, very unpredictable, but incredibly exciting to be a part of. I'm privileged to have been a producer on it, and it was awesome that we got all the way to a Grammy nomination. Got beat out by my old college nemesis, Nora Jones, but you win some, you lose some, and we'll be back for more.
Yeah, they're all winners there. So congratulations to all that, and I do appreciate. But I know I don't fully appreciate, but I do have some appreciation for the multi-ring circus that it must have been to bring all that together. A lot of moving parts, and not always moving in the same direction.
No. When you have that many personalities and that many factors, also the production was spread out. Some of it was done here in LA, some of it was in New York, some of it was in Oklahoma. All of us were spread out. So there's a lot of files flying back and forth, a lot of coordination, a lot of Zooms talking about, should we do this? Should we do that? Who's on board? Who dropped out? All that kind of stuff. Yes, it's a massive amount of chaos to manage a project like that, but we're all immensely proud of the result. On to the next one.
As well, you should be. Let me ask you about the Society of Composers and Lyricists. What's it take to become a member? And you've been involved in the organization at some of the highest levels, maybe the highest. I don't know all the levels that you've been in. I just know up to VP. So tell me about it.
That's as far as I got.
Okay.
I found the Society of Composers and Lyricists. We call it the SCL. It's really the United States' largest composer songwriter organization. I found it when I arrived in LA 20 years ago. I learned so much by being a part of it. I was accepted into the mentor program. I started visiting studios and composers and agents and just learning how the industry works. I mean, everything prior to that in my life, I went to college for music. I have a degree in classical piano and conducting, and I know how to make the music, but my college never taught me how to use those skills in the real world to get jobs, to work with people. I just know how to play. I know the theory, I know the history, but the SCL gave me a very practical, real world grounding into how the industry works, allowed me to meet, pretty much everyone in the industry. It's been a real privilege to have been a part of it. I started volunteering, which eventually led to me being on the board and now led to my current position as VP. But it's an organization that advocates for composers and songwriters, and a lot of that is done in DC, dealing with copyright law and AI and things like that.
Yep.
But it's also very educationally focused. So there's lots of seminars and screenings and FYC events and things like that where we support the composers and the songwriters, and we help each of us get better. So kind of harking back to what I said earlier, this community is just invaluable because it inspires me as a composer, and hopefully I'm part of inspiring more people beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have to be a composer of something in a TV show or a film or something like that to be a member, or can anybody who's a composer join or a lyricist join?
Pretty much anybody can join. We have several different levels of membership, and most of our central memberships are for composers and songwriters, but there are more limited memberships for people who are online only or who are students. We have patron sponsor memberships for people who are ancillary, like agents or publicists or music supervisors, things like that. But yes, we can basically offer membership to any of those people, no matter what the level of experience.
Sounds great. And how does the SCL contrast with the Academy of Scoring Arts that you're a past president of?
Yeah. I when I came to LA, I kind of experimented in both groups, and the Academy of Scoring Arts is another very worthwhile organization. I used to serve as president. I stepped down only because of my increasing responsibilities at the SCL, but the ASA, which you can find at scoringarts.com, focuses more on score breakdowns, education, like it's really in the weeds stuff. So every one of those events, we're pulling up orchestral scores from film or TV or classical music or game music, and we're going down to the individual instrument level. We often sequence the parts ahead of time so that we can isolate, like, what's the flute doing? What are the woodwinds doing? And I mean, we've been known to spend, 3 hours on like 4 or 5 measures of music, because it's just so fascinating when you get down to that granular level. But I was a part of that when I first arrived in LA, and fantastic organization, and so much film music, especially film music and the other types to study and get deeper with. So I would highly recommend it for anybody who that's their thing, who wants to get deeper into the music and continue to learn. I look at both the SCL and the ASA as my form of continuing education. I'm not in college anymore, so I'm not going to classes, I'm not taking exams, but I do need to continually immerse myself in the craft. I need to be aware of what other composers are doing, both past and present, just to sharpen my skills and to know where the trends are going. So I think they're both really important organizations, and I'd recommend them to any interested composer.
Yeah. At what point in your young life did you realize music was the calling for you?
Probably like 3.
3. Okay.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I was kind of born a tinkering musician, and I remember when I was in 5th grade, I was like, well, I'm sure by the time I'm in 6th grade, I'll have my first album out. Then by the time I got to junior high and high school, I got really immersed, thanks to some really wonderful teachers who helped me and nurtured what I was doing, both in piano and with arranging and record and composition and orchestrating. I got very early opportunities to do that stuff when I was in junior high. It started, and that's when the bug bit me. The fact that I could have ideas in my head, I could put those notes on paper, and my peers would play the ideas in my head. Like, that was really, that something came alive the first time that happened, and continues to this day.
So you have a bachelor's in piano performance, did you say?
Yeah. I started piano performance. I did a lot of conducting.
Okay.
I switched into music ed because I wondered whether that might be the best use of all my skills. I finished at the University of North Texas. And that was a great place for a great music education.
Yeah, now when you did the piano performance, I presume that's all classical.
Yes.
Maybe it's okay. There might have been some jazz in there, but probably.
Actually, that's one of my biggest regrets. North Texas is known as one of the world's foremost jazz schools. And at that time in my life, I was very focused on the classical. So I did all the stuff on the classical side of the building, which was also a fantastic department. I did dabble in jazz singers because I've always loved jazz vocals, take 6, that kind of stuff. So I did a little bit of jazz. I wish I had done a lot more. It probably would have served me better in the long run, but that's who I was at the time.
And do you still play a lot of piano? What do you do?
I do. I mean, I play recreationally for myself, and I'll play for anything I'm recording, but I'm no longer well practiced enough to be session caliber. Like, you don't put me in front of somebody else's complicated music and expect me to, perform it on the spot in sight reading. But I've always loved the piano. And as you know, in this era of music making, so much of it is usually keyboard based because we're using sampled instruments to trigger all kinds of things. That said, it is important to have a basis in real instruments, as I call them. I took up the trumpet in high school. I played sax before that. I played percussion. I played mallets. And those gave me an understanding of how those instruments work. So when I write for them, hopefully I have some direct insight rather than just plunking them out on the piano, because the piano is not, or a synth or a MIDI keyboard is not a perfect approximation of how winds and strings actually work in real life.
Absolutely. So like, we're both sax players. So yeah, I mean, if you give me something in A flat, I mean, that's not the same as giving it to me in G. So yeah, those are real. And for the 4 months that I took violin to do exactly like what you just said, have a better understanding of the instrument. Open strings sound different than non-open strings, and you can play the same note in different places. So it just depends on on what you're trying to do. Some things are easier, double stops are impossible or easy. Just all those things if you don't have an idea of the instrument.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd even say like there's dimensions to it. I mean, as a trumpet or a brass player, like I know the sonic difference that the trumpet makes when you play it quiet and when you play it loud. It's not just a volume control on a fader and a sequencer. It's materially different in timbre. And when you understand the different ways of playing each instrument in the different ranges with different techniques and so on, you multiply the possibilities of what you can think of as a composer or as an arranger.
Right. What are you working on now, Dave?
I'm about to get involved in an album project where I'll be arranging a lot of the orchestral material for that for an artist. I have a personal project I'm working on, which you may know a little bit about because I know I've sent it into the Symphonina competition for the
Well, we
past year.
listened a little bit on the intro, actually. We'll listen a little bit more
There you
when
go.
we're done. But yeah, tell us about it.
So that piece has a long history I won't bother you with, but two of my very favorite composers in the classical genre would be Leonard Bernstein and George Gershwin. I'm a huge fan of those two composers. Gershwin changed my life when I discovered Rhapsody in Blue when I was like 12 or 13, and I became obsessed with it. Gershwin as a pop music composer, trying to find this more serious idiom where he could express himself to a larger scale than a song would allow him. And when he brought jazz into the concert hall the way he did and opened up a huge avenue in American music, like that really took me. So Gershwin and Bernstein, two of my favorite composers from that era. One day I was just messing around and I was like, these two composers, they never met in real life, even though they are larger than life personalities in the history of American music. And there's a certain amount of overlap in their skill set and how we view them in history. But actually, they're very, very different people. Gershwin from the pop music world, Bernstein largely from the classical and academic world. He went to Harvard, he went to Curtis. I think there's something in Bernstein's personality where he wished he was more of the composer that Gershwin was, and Gershwin wanted to be more of the serious composer that Bernstein ended up being decades later. So I started wondering, what would it be like if these two met? Could I write a piece that captured their personalities? Although I very much look at them as quite different. One's left brain, one's right brain, one's classical, one's pop. Both are trying to cross the bridge to the other side. So I wrote this piece called Lenny and George Walk into a Bar.
Yep.
We'll play on two Jews walk into a bar because they're both Jewish composers.
Right.
And just kind of imagine what it would be like if they had a conversation, which I imagine would be quite spirited and probably, I don't know that they'd agree on everything, but it's fun to think of it in a musical context. So I have a 9-minute piece, the Lenny and George piece that I am actively working on figuring out how I can get it recorded. I'm working on another companion piece that will go with it, and I hope to make that into a record, hopefully this year.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
And if we can be of any help to you along the way, you just let us know on that one.
Let's chat.
What if you think about people coming into the orchestral world today? Let's say someone who's between 20 to 25, and they want to quote unquote make it. There's various ways to make it, but is there any general advice that you would give someone? They have a lot of challenges, and they could have a lot of brick walls that they would envision in front of themselves. But oftentimes, I think some of them, we just have to figure out a way to go around them, over them, under them, or drill right through them. What's your take on all that for the current world?
Sure. That's a great question. I've used this metaphor before, but I often think of success in the musical or creative industries or wherever you are as being a bit of it, like there's 3 pillars to a successful career. One would be the creative, like you should be good at your craft and you should be exercising your craft as diligently as an athlete goes to the gym or whatever the equivalent is. Gone are the days where you could write one song or one piece and it would be your magnum opus and the world would flock to you. The world is filled with millions of pieces of music, billions now that we have AI contributing to the situation.
Probably.
So if you're serious about it, you need to be good at your creative and you need to be getting better and evolving as an artist. So you keep writing. You finish one piece, you put it on the shelf or whatever, and you move on to the next because your next piece will always be informed by the experience of what you did before. The second is I think everybody in this day and age needs to be technical, needs to know the technical side of what we do. Because if you write the greatest piece ever heard, but you don't know how to record it, then you can't put it in a form that's tangible for the rest of the world to be able to experience it. So knowing your DAW or your notation program, whatever the avenue is that you need to specialize in, I think is really important. And then the third, I mean, I hate calling it the marketing arm or the communications arm or the social arm, but the reality is if you did number one perfectly, the creative, you're a really great composer and musician, and you have all your technical chops together and you made a A+ recording of your piece, if you don't take the time to tell people about it and put it out there, then the first two were for nothing, because no one's ever going to know that you did it. So unless you're happy with that situation, so all three fields, the creative, the technical, and the marketing, they're constantly evolving fields, and I highly recommend every creative exercise those three. And in the early stages of your career, typically you may have to do all three. So you just continue doing them all. You keep flipping between them. You get better and better at each of them. And at a certain point, I trust you'll find success, and you'll find people along your way who will help you with the things that maybe you're not as good at, allowing you to focus on the things you are good at. So I think as long as you continue to grow in that way, and hey, you can do all the things I mentioned in 20 or 30 minutes a day, just a little bit of writing, a little bit of recording, a little bit of publicizing what you're doing, even if it's just as simple as a social media post of you in the studio, or get on camera and say something that's inspiring, or what you've been through, or share it with somebody. That's how you build an audience. So that's my bottom line advice for anybody at an entry level or even at a high level. Like we keep doing what we do, and we evolve and we get better at it.
I would love to see that's true for the people at our perceived upper level. Let's say Hans Zimmer, John Williams is 90, whatever he is now, so I'd give him a break. But Alan Menken, people at that level, and ask them the same question, and know that they do put in that extra time every day. Hey, I would say, I sometimes bring up Kenny G as an example of someone who's very diligent in their practice. People can like what he plays. People can not like what he plays in performances. But the guy plays 3 hours, practices 3 hours a day, every day, and he's been doing that for a long time. So that kind of dedication, I think, is extremely important. If you have that time, like you said, if you don't have that time because you have other demands in your life, then even 20 minutes is a great workout because it beats 0 minutes.
That's right. I can't remember who it was. There was I think he was a violinist, 90 years old or something, and people said, why? And he's a concert violinist, and people would ask him, why do you keep practicing? And he would say, because I believe I'm getting better. I can't remember who. I wish I could remember who that.
I remember that too. I've heard that too. That's.
But yeah, you mentioned people like Kenny G or Hans or Alan Menken or whatever. The nice thing is, as you get to higher levels of the industry, you do have more resources to help you with things, but it doesn't take away that desire to innovate, to create, and to think of new things. All the people you mentioned are people who are constantly getting better at their craft, even if they have somebody else doing their laundry, whatever it is. Yeah, but exactly. And I hope that's where I'll be too. I love making music. I love talking about and being in community with people who are making music. And yeah, there are things in my life I wish I didn't have to spend so much time doing. But at some point, as things evolve, I will hand more of those things off my plate so I can focus on the things that I really love.
Sounds good. If people want to get in touch with you, David, what's the best way to do that?
My website, daviddoss.com. I'm on all the socials, David Doss. Feel free to follow me and touch base there.
All right, David, we wish you best of success with your projects this year. We're going to listen to some more of Lenny and George walk into a bar on the way out here. And as always, as I meant it, if it can be of any help to you at all, you just let us know.
Thank you, David. It's been a privilege being a part of this.